Hi everyone, I'm Mandy Freger. Welcome to my YouTube channel, which is relatively new at this point. There are a lot of foundational videos that I really had intended on making for the channel, but due to what's going on in the world today, I thought that I would make this video to help some of you out there that might be asking some of the same questions that my clients have this week. So as I indicated, I am a licensed professional counselor and a licensed behavior specialist in the state of Pennsylvania, and I practice in the Pittsburgh region. One of the things that I don't think that I mentioned about my credentials in the past is that I do hold a certification as a teacher in private schools in Pennsylvania under the designation of social emotional support. And I also hold certification for private schools as a principal in Pennsylvania. And I obtained these certifications when I was the director at Highlands Hospital Regional Center for Autism, which was a private school program. It was a center-based program for students with the designation of autism spectrum disorders. And we were in an affiliation agreement with Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital. So a lot of my autism background training and staff support came from the Cleveland Clinic at that time. More about my bio can be found on my website, about my credentials and my background at www.mandyfridger.com. So this week, as I mentioned, since I've been in practice, I've been a clinical director for a long time, and I've also really stayed active in direct practice through my 20 plus years in my career with working with community-based mental health, center-based mental health, children, adolescent, adults, as well as energy psychology techniques. So I have, again, a little bit of a diverse background with these different modalities. But I seem to end up in my private practice now with themes of the week that clients kind of come in with as a collective thoughts, worries, problems that are coming up. And they're not always current event issues, but of course this week was. And this week's theme, which many people have been talking about, really the whole world, were themes around the coronavirus. And we're in Pittsburgh, and although I don't believe that we've had many, if any, confirmed cases, our schools recently have closed as a proactive measure. And some of our universities had been closed, or I think that they were making a move to, adapt as a response after their spring break slowly as they were coming back to moving toward online classes. So I believe this coming Monday is when our schools are officially taking a break, and we'll see how long that lasts. But with this transition, the specific topic that's coming up in sessions is really from my parents, and the stress levels are high, not necessarily because of the illness, but what do I do now that my kids are going to be home? So there's a couple levels to this. One, of course, there's just the basic adjustment and logistics about who will watch the kids, who will be home, who has to go to work, who's able to work from home at this point, and those type of things. But one of the things that I really want to emphasize, and this is what I've been talking with the parents this week, and I'll come back to this piece of this, is the parental energetics and the parental response to this, to your kids. And, low panic, low anxiety, but I'll come back to this in a minute. So I want to break this up into two populations. I do a lot of work, as I mentioned, with those diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders. When I had a talk show last year, I kind of came up with this term to identify people who were not diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. And I called that group of people, which is everyone else, non-spectrum spectrumers. And the purpose of that label, so to speak, really was to acknowledge that as people, we're a spectrum of how we function. This is how I see and how I work in treatment. When we have people that have executive functioning issues that are diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder and those who are not, there's still a continuum of how these people think and process information too. So I kind of just use those terms to designate the populations, those diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder formally and those without. you will see me avoid terms such as neurotypical, high functioning, low functioning, all of those kind of blanket terms that I think a lot of people use. So I think that these two terms fit a little bit better. So for the sake of this video, let me start to talk about recommendations for kids that are home who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders. My first thought is, if you've worked with social stories with your child, this is a great time to go back and create a social story. Many of you that work with social stories have gotten really good at writing them because they need them to be very individualized. If you've done this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, this might be a good time to research Carol Gray and what social stories are. There is a formula for writing them. In the social stories, you may not necessarily include details about the virus and the illness specifically, but more importantly, what I see the kids struggling with this week is really the transition. And, what am I going to do? I don't have school. This isn't my regular routine. What will I do now that I'm home? How will I fill my time? So I think that the social stories can really help address some of that. The other point that this may be common sense for us adults, but I do think it's worth repeating to the kids that are diagnosed with spectrum disorders and who are not and maybe younger, really about this concept of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, that really everyone is in this same position. And this might be hard for kids who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders to get. They may need to hear this more and more. Everyone is in the same position. You are not missing an activity and someone else is there participating. It's canceled for everybody. The other important thing to note, especially with the kids who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders, is, sometimes some of these individuals really are looking to blame someone for the changes because they're upset about it. And so I would be very clear in a proactive way that this isn't mom or dad making this call. This isn't school staff. This is, a bigger picture. This is a bigger overarching issue that the state, the government, other people are making these decisions, and we can't control this. We don't have the choice to go to the activity. It's not happening, and it's not allowed to for whatever reason that your child would understand. So I think it's really important to emphasize that too. The other thing, if you don't already have one, if you have a child who's diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, chances are you do have a home schedule that you follow. If you don't, if you come to me for treatment, that's probably one of the first things that I'm going to recommend, at least a general schedule, so the kids know what to expect, even kids that aren't diagnosed. Those of you that have schedules at home, you know how it kind of works for you. So I would recommend sketching out maybe a tentative schedule, just so that your kids who are schedule bound feel a little bit of predictive comfort in the schedule and what to expect in their days to come. So I know that many of the schools are scrambling. I have heard from the staff on the other side of this that even the teachers and the professors are really not prepared either about what's to come, how they're going to post some stuff online, how are they going to teach, is it going to be virtual? And I think that the schools really have a lot to work out. This is an urgent situation, and this really has not happened before. So I think that it's important to explain to the kids and reassure them that this is new for your teachers too. This is new for your school. Everybody is new to this. So some of my college kids are a little bit worried about, will this be harder? How is the grading going to go? And even though I don't know this for a fact, I'm sort of inclined to tell them that, your professors are in the same boat. They're probably not exactly sure. There are going to be kinks. People are going to have questions. They're going to be confused about maybe certain aspects or how things are communicated. So when it comes test time, I would hope that teachers and professors are really doing the best that they can to make sure that questions are answered and consider the environment and the delivery of the class when they're grading tests. So that is one thing that I talk to my young people about, which also might be helpful to talk to your kids about. Some of the districts I know in our area, they do some things online anyway. This is the public school, the K through 12, where especially the older kids, they're getting homework, on online platforms, and they're going in and taking quizzes or doing homework. So hopefully, the schools will be able to, adjust with their existing online platforms, and it won't be too much of a transition other than more of the same for the kids that are in the public schools. So for the kids who are not diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, so my non-spectrum spectrumers out there, one of the hardest things for them also, I'm finding, is the FOMO effect, right? The fear of missing out. But I think that it's a little bit different for this population. I think that the older kids, let me back up, the younger kids might have a little bit of a difficulty of understanding that not everyone's there. They might need a little bit of explanation that they're just not missing out on something or activities that no one is. But for the older kids, I think the fear of missing out is coming up with the ideas of missing school-based activities, sports, social events that are being canceled, just to keep people isolated and to keep them safe and protected. So one of the things that I think that is maybe an assumption of parents, and I ask you to step back and think about this, is that we might assume that our kids are connected all the time socially because they're on their social media and texting and, talking to their friends online all the time, or even virtually like this. But be mindful that this is the first time likely that your kids have really been physically separated from their peers on a mass level like this. Even though they might be having contact with a friend here and there, think about when you were in school. You're going to school every day and you're surrounded by many, many peers all day long. So just be mindful as a parent that this can feel really different. And if you're noticing different mood changes at home with your kids while they're home, especially the older ones, reassure them and maybe talk about this piece. They might not really even be aware of it. They might say, I miss my friends, but it might have a larger impact on their mood than you think. So this is a good area, I think, to reassure the kids too and really talk about. So this is a big point of the video, and this was really one of my first thoughts when I thought about creating this video, that this is really such an important aspect of what's going on now. And I think that this area can affect both populations, really all of us, people that are diagnosed with spectrum disorders and people that aren't. And it's my belief, and I talk about this a lot in my clinical sessions, that American society has sort of conditioned us to make us believe that we have to stay busy and moving and doing something and on to the next thing. As an energy therapist, from a psychoenergetic standpoint, which I haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk about this yet on the channel, but this kind of mindset keeps our brains in flight mode. And a lot of energy psychology principles are, grounded in Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory. And I'd encourage you to look him up. Maybe I'll put a link below. But polyvagal theory really encompasses, there's a lot to it, but the basics are that it acknowledges fight, flight, or freeze. And you may have heard of these before. This is the area in the brain called the amygdala when it feels like there's danger, that it will react in one of three ways. It'll either run from danger, it'll either choose to fight, prompt us to choose to fight, to choose to run, or to choose to freeze and do nothing. And this is a primal response that we have. However, the more that we run from activity to activity, the more our brain gets really good at running. And the downside of this is our brains think it has to run all the time. And what's next? And what are we doing? This is where this can be problematic. And with my clients, I begin to have these individualized conversations about how their amygdala is doing with these mechanisms. So we've been hearing a lot this week, but don't panic. So again, I'm hearing people panic more because of what are we going to do with our kids in the life adjustments? Again, this is our brain overworking in, fight, flight, and freeze. What do we do now? What do we do next? Let's prepare. We got to do this. It's really, if we step back and think about it, we're probably in that mindset all the time. It's just, this is a transition that's prompting this in a different way. So let me talk to you parents now about your kids being home. I'll shortly be posting another video with a brief exercise that I think really can help you with a lot of this stress for you mom and dad, and even for kids. It's an old exercise that came from Thoughtful Therapy, Dr. Callahan, which I'll make another video about in a little bit. But if you're not directly affected by this illness right now, try to reframe this time as an opportunity to slow down. And you may never have an opportunity such as this again, or you may, once this passes, choose to adopt this new mindset and slowing down and being mindful into your lifestyle. So I want to really encourage you to do that one. So along those lines, take a breath. And let me suggest some alternative activities you can do with your kids while they're at home, if you're home with them. So the first thing, remember why you had them in the first place, because you wanted them. And now they're little people. So take advantage of getting to know them better. Ask them how they feel about things. Spend some time with them. It doesn't always have to be digital, which I'll talk about too in a minute. But get to know them better. The second thing is be a role model that it's okay not to be busy all the time. And this is probably going to be harder for you parents than it is for the kids because we're in that mindset that I just talked about. We're running from activity to activity all the time. So also keep in mind and send the message to your kids that this can be fun, that just because they're home, they don't have to be bored and the negative messages happen. What do I do now? And then your feelings go up like, what am I going to do with my kids? Try to reframe that again as an opportunity to have fun, to get to know them, and pull out some other tools in your toolbox as far as activities, which can be interactive things, board games. I don't know how many people still engage in board games, but as a family, these can be really great. And lots of people don't have the time to do it now. So again, another opportunity. Coloring books. Now we have coloring for all ages. So it could be cooperative, which is kind of cool. People take turns and you color this color, you color this part. What color should we color this? So it can be a little bit of a team effort. You can engage more time in cooking meals, preparing meals, and clearing up spaces in the house. I'm sure a lot of people wish that they had time to do that. So again, another opportunity for some time to do the things that we don't always have time to do. So the other piece, or the other suggestion that I have is find relaxation exercises to do. So when we're rushed, we become so distanced from details and sensory aspects of things. There are a couple suggestions that I'm just going to throw out there for people listening for how to do this. If you haven't engaged in different types of relaxation exercises with you and your family that you're comfortable with, for younger kids, I recommend Zenden, Zenden. It's a woman who is kind of she's cool, and she's really she keeps the younger kids engaged, and it's interactive, and it really is about attention to details, sensory details. And from a psychological standpoint, she's putting in concepts of dialectical behavior therapy to be able to come back and ground in sensory aspects of things. So I think that that's really cool for younger kids. Some kids that are a little bit older might think that that's a little bit too young for them. And for adults, I recommend Qigong. There's probably a lot of videos out there on basics and routines to do. The interesting thing with this is I feel like that this is helpful for grounding. And when we talk in terms of energy psychology, when I do anyway, when I'm assessing individuals, I have to assess how much their energy is being pulled down, how much that they need an activating exercise to balance that, or how much that they need something deactivating to pull them sort of out of their thoughts and out of their heads. So if you're the type of personality that you're run, and that I just described, Qigong is a really cool intervention. I want to talk about meditation now. I think that meditation is essentially very difficult in a nutshell. It's been accepted and it's in a lot of clinical textbooks now that it's, you know, a really good intervention that is for, and yoga also to help relax. But I hear often that people who are inexperienced or have a lot of that mental energy and anxiety that I was talking about as a result of running, when they attempt to do meditation, they often struggle with it, and their attention span isn't their attention span isn't very long, and they give up pretty quickly. So I just want to say that meditation, in my opinion, even though it's very reputable, this is really hard for beginners, and it really is an advanced technique. So it's kind of like telling someone who really has not had any training to run that you're going to run a 5K in a month. It's kind of like that kind of comparison. So I think it just can be hit or miss for people who just try to dive right into meditation because it's recommended everywhere. There are other tools in the energy psychology world, and this is again what I do with my clients, to build up to that and to be able to train the brain in shorter increments to be able to be present, because that really is what meditation is asking, that all your thoughts are slowing down and your ability to remain present for long periods of time is able to occur. And again, that's really hard. It's easier said than done. So the other thing I'd like to mention, this is a little bit of a sidebar at this point, but I also have had people go into advanced retreats or meditation who have not had the greatest experiences and have really essentially relaxed their brain. I think probably is what the mechanism is happening, even though we don't know exactly what happens, to the point that their body and their brain becomes fearful of releasing or going there for different issues, subconscious or consciously. So I also would refrain, if you haven't really practiced any energy therapy techniques, mindfulness, remaining present for a long time, or do have underlying clinical issues, that you seek help from a licensed professional, maybe before jumping into something that intense for you. The other thing, I'm going to go back to recommendations for kids. Since we're talking about sensory aspects of things, to my knowledge, there is not really any research in ASMR, and I can't really remember the whole term right now, but if you YouTube it, you will find it. There's plenty of videos on this. It's ASMR. Younger kids seem to find enjoyment in these videos, and it's a variety of people engaging in different sensory aspects. It could be people whispering, to different repetitive sounds, to things that are visually aesthetic or stimulating to people, or different other things like that. So a lot of my young people are kind of into this. This might be a good place to start if your child isn't really skilled or hasn't had the practice of noticing details. You can also implement this and take it a step further at home. Since you are home and you have the time, checking in with your child, one, how they feel throughout the day about different things, but also asking them about the sensory aspects of things. If you're playing a game, or if you're cooking, talking about the smells, talking about what they like to smell, what smells are pleasing to them, what they like to watch, what colors they like, what patterns they like. So this can open up a whole lot of dialogue to, again, get to know your child on levels that you haven't before, but also can serve as potentially relaxation exercises. So I hope that some of this information was helpful in this time of stress, and I hope that all of you and your families are doing well and staying as protected as possible. And of course, follow the guidelines from your local healthcare practitioners, and really have a good time. If you can, if you're grounded, make use of the time, and please keep a positive attitude. The stress really compounds everything and really contributes to our how well we are with our immune system too. So stay happy, stay positive, stay fun if you're well, and moving forward with life. Thanks for watching.